Alright, this is my final milestone project. I'm going to go ahead and run through a game real quick. So this is the main screen where you can choose your difficulty, username, size, and look at the high scores. High scores is currently empty. Let's go ahead and change that. So, okay, lost immediately. I'm doing that a lot. So we have a score of 1. And look at that. There we go. Our high score has now been added. So Colton has a high score of 1. Let's go ahead and try to change that real quick so I can actually demonstrate the game. Of course, this would happen now. We've got a timer here that's used in calculating the score. And there's our flood fill. So it will reveal all of these tiles as well as the immediately surrounding tiles that have neighbors. I'll show how that works in a moment, but I'm gonna go ahead and purposefully click on a bomb now because our score is higher. So now we have a score of 25. And that should have overridden. So that's all saved to a file. And there we go. That's overridden our previous score. So that's how the high scores work. And then if I go ahead and quickly add a different score to this, there we go. Quickly as possible. That score will also be added. So if it's a new username, it will be added. If it's an old username, it will be overridden. Like a old arcade game. Then you can also search these. So if there were a lot of these, you could search them. And they are stored alphabetically. So, and then one more, we can change the size of the board. So now that'll be a 15 by 15. It gets quite big. All right, so I'll go ahead and walk through some of the code here. Here's the flood fill. So flood fill is recursive. If the cell you've clicked on is not visited, and whether or not to flood fill on an unvisited cell is handled elsewhere. But if it's not visited, then it'll set visited to true. And then if the immediately adjacent tile to it has 0 neighbors and is less than 6 tiles away in either direction from the initial tile, then it will do flood fill on that coordinate. It takes the X and Y coordinate as a parameter. If it's not live but does have neighbors, it will be visited but not run recursion on. So you can see that it's always the one that's 1 away from the currently the cell from the cell that's currently got flood fill called on it. So that's how we achieve those walls around the blocks of safe cells. Let's see. High scores are calculated using generate score. So we have this high score class that handles all of the reading, writing to file, generating scores, that kind of a thing. So right here we have read from file, write to file. And then generate score. So if you win, it will take your initial score will be 1,000. That will go down each second. So it's minus the total seconds elapsed of the elapsed time span that's passed when we generate the score at the end of the game. And then you get a bonus depending on your difficulty. So difficulty is 1, 2, or 3. We multiply that by 100 and add it to your total score. If you lose, you start at 0, and then you gain the total seconds that you played up to 100. That's then concatenated into a string and added to the file depending on whether or not it is an old username. And if it's an old username, let's see. Yeah, we get the array from the text file. Yeah, and then we're going to use this for loop to go through each score log split it by the dash, and then see if the username matches. And then if the username matches, then we're going to check if the score is higher. And if the score is higher, then we replace that score. Otherwise, if old username was never set to true, then it's a new username. And so it will be stored it'll just be added into the array. As far as coding challenges, floodfill was difficult to wrap my head around. Recursion was just a weird way to think. It was just a weird way to try and think. I just had trouble comprehending it. So I had to watch a lot of tutorials, kind of spend a lot of time thinking about it before it really clicked that, oh, that's how it works. Especially getting it to work when you don't. Basically, everybody I've talked to had this issue where you would click on a cell that had neighbors and it would just reveal the entire board. So I got around that by only running floodfill if you click on an empty cell and not trying to run floodfill from a visited cell. I'm sure you could, if you clicked on a cell that had neighbors, find the nearest neighborless cell and then run floodfill from that. But this just seemed like the simpler solution. Also, this doesn't seem like much of a challenge now, but after C# 1, I had basically zero idea of how to use classes. I basically went through the entirety of C# 1 doing completely non-object oriented programming. So using classes and that they had to be instantiated and what static meant. Those were all just completely new concepts for me that were very, very useful. Beforehand, I had been using a lot of strings to store data and a lot of just loops and a lot of methods that were in places they should not have been. So getting classes to all be under the same namespace, getting them to be able to instantiate and call methods from each other, knowing how a static method behaves differently from a regular method are all new things that kind of enabled me to be able to do this project. And then also, this is another challenge was that this is just a much bigger project than I've ever worked on before. With there's more lines of code in this to keep track of what everything does. So kind of trying to keep track of how everything works together is a bit of a challenge. I learned towards the end again that I need to be commenting my code better, because you'll notice a bit of a lack of comments here, which kind of made it difficult to figure out what was going on. Later on, I did end up adding comments, but I've yet to go back and kind of re-comment out everything. So yeah, thank you for watching my project. It's been a big learning experience. Yeah. See you next year.